Well, thank you so much for staying with us. Yes, we're looking at the World Health Day with special concern over increasing cases of diabetes. Well, Nigeria joins the rest of the world this Thursday to mark the World Health Day.
Yes, indeed. The World Health Day is a day set aside by the United Nations to celebrate itself, and it usually features a cutting of a cake.
Well, however, this tradition of cutting cake will be replaced by healthier options like fruit, and this is because the main goals of the World Health Day 2016 are to increase awareness about the rise in diabetes and consequences in low and middle income countries.
Yes, indeed. The awareness campaign is to include steps to prevent, diagnose and care for people living with diabetes.
Well, before now, diabetes was perceived as a disease of the affluent, but it is on the increase all over the world, and it is now common in developing countries.
Yes, indeed. In 2014, 422 million adults had diabetes worldwide, compared with 166 million in 1990.
Well, about 1.5 million deaths was recorded in 2012, and higher than the optimal blood glucose levels caused 2.2 million deaths, and more than 80% of these deaths occur in low and middle income countries.
Well, the facts and the figures are quite much, but we'll be talking less about that. We'll just go to a discussion with our experts now here with us in the studio.
Yes, and we're being joined today by the Professor of Medicine and Endocrinology, University of Abuja, Professor Prof Anumah. Thank you so much for coming. And she's also the chairperson, Prof Anumah Medical Mission. It's nice having you. Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Now, what is essentially, let's start from the very basic now to acquaint people who are still struggling to understand what diabetes is all about. How does it really start, and essentially, how does one know you have diabetes?
Okay, thank you. In simple terms, diabetes just means a situation where the body cannot utilize glucose properly. It's as simple as that. And that's because in the body we have a chemical produced, or a hormone, called insulin. This chemical is the one that helps us to utilize everything we take as a source of energy and nutrition in order to live. So for some reason, this chemical can get to a stage where it becomes insufficient to do that work. So the body now is not able to utilize sugar properly. And when that happens, then that glucose just accumulates in the blood and the level becomes high.
At what point does this insulin become insufficient?
Well, what I would say is that there are risk factors for it. There are reasons why it can become insufficient. So we call that risk factors. And what are some of these risk factors? Aging is a risk factor for diabetes. As we age, there are certain changes that occur in the body that will naturally tilt us towards lifestyle diseases, except we change behavior. If we change behavior at a particular point in time, then that can help us in the future. So aging is a risk factor. Blood sugar will rise with age naturally. Blood pressure will rise with age naturally. If we don't want that, then we must do something. The second risk factor is weight, obesity. And I'm always saying that God is a perfect scientist, in the sense that for every height there is an ideal weight. Once you allow your weight to get beyond what that height is meant to carry, then you're looking for trouble. Weight on its own can bring diabetes. Weight on its own can bring hypertension. Even some cases of cancer are because of obesity. Okay, so for everybody, there are ways you can assess yourself and know where you are. There are parameters we use. For example, the body mass index, what we call the body mass index, and it's simple mathematics. Take your weight and divide by the square of your height, and you get your BMI. And normal BMI should be 18.5 to 24.9. So any BMI 25 and above is not correct, is not okay. The other parameter we use is waist circumference, just a simple tailor's tape. Put it around your navel and check how much it is. Now for males, it should not be more than 94 centimeters. And for females, it should not be more than 80 centimeters. So once it's more than these figures, it means you have accumulated fat here, and that's the beginning of problem. The other risk factor is diet. You know what we did in developing countries, including Nigeria, is we civilized everything around us. So we began to acquire the diseases of civilization. Diabetes is a disease of civilization. Hypertension is a disease of civilization. Heart attacks, we didn't used to have heart attacks, but now we have it. Cancer is a disease of civilization. So as we civilized everything, we began to acquire the diseases of civilization.
Yeah, maybe you will really have to break it down in that civilization. Okay, is it civilization in quotes?
What we did was, for example, as far as diet is concerned, we left the African healthy diet for the civilized, westernized, unhealthy diet. That's what we did. We shifted, and because these diets, particularly what you find in eateries, is very fashionable for us to go to eateries, where you find those things that look quite attractive, very exciting, and people love them. They are high in sugar, they are high in fat, bad fat, they are high in salt. All right. So as we consume these things, we stress the pancreas. That's the place where the cells that produce this famous chemical comes from. As we stress it, a stage comes, it gets exhausted, and when it gets exhausted, there is no produce
anymore. Now you talked about it being one of the risk factors being age. We're beginning to see incidences of younger persons, people as young as 10, having diabetes.
Yeah. Well, we have two different types of diabetes. We have the one we call type 1 that occur in young people, children, and then type 2, the one that we used to call the adult onset. But this one, type 2, is becoming common in children now, and the reason is because of change in lifestyle. For example, I did a diabetes prevention program in 20 secondary schools in the FCT here, and what I found is very scary. You get to secondary schools during break time, and even when the school is a day school, what you find in the children's hands are a bottle of, one of these fizzy drinks and a donut or a meat pie, even when the child is coming from home. Parents have become lazy. We can no longer prepare healthy meal and give the child to go to school with. All right? So you find these children, 10, 12, they are weighing 100 kilograms, 80 kilograms. That child is dying slowly, but the parent does not understand. What the parent thinks is that I'm affluent, and my child is demonstrating, is showcasing my affluence. Unfortunately, that's what is in the skull of Nigerian parents, some Nigerian parents. But that child is dying slowly. So we're finding diabetes now in young people. Actually, I had a 5-year-old with diabetes. That child, fortunately, is being managed very well. He's in SS3 now, but became diabetic at 5 years.
Well, what of people who eat healthy, healthy diets, our own African diets, without much exposure to westernized food, but they're still on the big side? Would you classify that as obesity?
The other risk factor, very important, is family history. If one parent has that, because of that gene blood collection, if one parent has diabetes, any of the children has a 40% chance of developing diabetes at one stage or the other in his or her lifetime. If both parents are, there's as much as 70% chance. Also, if one sibling is, there's a 40% chance. Now, if you have a family history, it means that this individual must get well informed, live right as early as possible in order to avoid it. Okay, so, and when people are still on their big side, it means, is diet, you combine diet, lifestyle changes means dietary modifications and physical activity. All right, so even if you modify your diet and you are not physically active, you are still looking for trouble.
Now, you talked about the mindset of parents who feel that giving their children fizzy drinks and donut to school is a sign, is a status symbol, and all of that. What are your concerns, really, if parents don't begin to change the diet for their children, say in the next 10 years, 5 years, especially for a country like Nigeria?
Well, the approach to to this problem. I mean, today is World Health Day, and to show you the importance of this disease that is a monster in our midst, and if we don't do anything about it, we're heading for trouble, because in this country we don't have what it takes to handle the complications of these diseases. So for me, the cheaper option we have is prevention, and the media has a very important role to play, because there's a big gap in knowledge in as regards what is the relationship between my food and my health, what is the relationship between how active I am and my health, what is the relationship between my weight and these lifestyle diseases. There's a very big gap in knowledge, and the media has a significant role to play in educating people, to empower people to get to know. Then I'm sure when they get to know, they will take steps to prevent these things.
Now looking at the cost of prevention, really, it could be low, but sustaining this issue of encouraging people to eat healthy meals. Healthy meals in our context could be very expensive. When you look at eating fresh vegetables, fresh foods, fresh day in, day out, a lot of Nigerians may feel the storage system for some of this food in our homes is not available, and so the very available one is to get the ones on the shelf for the children to take to school and all of that. So in as much as the prevention is cheap at the long run, but then in the short term, the cost of buying some of these things is on the high side.
Well, the truth is this. If you look at the devastating consequences of lifestyle diseases, diabetes, hypertension, whatever it is, when you look at the cost of the devastating complications of these diseases, still the cheaper, whatever effort anyone, I've been in the field of diabetes for too long, and I know that it is not, people don't necessarily have to come in the helpless state they come to us in the hospital. They don't have to. It is preventable. So the cheaper option still for us is prevention. So whatever effort any individual needs to take to prevent these diseases is the best option we have.
Now, what form of care is available for the two types of diabetes in Nigeria? Are there drugs to treat the two types mentioned, type 1 and type 2?
Yeah, we have facility to some extent to care for these individuals with, these chronic diseases. It's a lifetime disease. It's treatable, but it's a lifetime disease. We treat them depending on what stage they have come to us. One of the big problems we have in this country is early diagnosis. People don't come early. More than 60% of people with type 2 diabetes, by the time they are getting to us, they have all sorts of chronic complications of diabetes already. It doesn't necessarily have to be so. But if we catch individuals very early, we can manage them with just lifestyle modification, modifying the diet and, being physically active and avoiding tobacco smoking. With these measures, there are a group of them that we can just handle this way. They are not on medications.
What are those early symptoms, really, that one will notice?
Well, what I would say is that we should just create the culture of checking our blood sugars frequently, because it can be there. That's why it's called a silent killer. It can be there and you have no idea, you have no clue, but it's causing quiet damages. The day something comes up, that this person presents in the hospital with kidney failure. What is the problem? Diabetes. Are you getting me? Presents with a stroke. What is it? Diabetes. Presents with a heart attack. What is it? Diabetes. So people should learn. We should have the culture. We don't have the culture in Nigeria to, go for frequent checks. I know it's improving now, but we need to improve more. All right? So it may have no symptom at all. Therefore, it's only when you go to check that, you find blood sugar is not behaving. Then we have this group of people, apart from, diet, physical activity, very important. We have a group of people, depending on what the blood sugar is, that's what determines what we do. If despite lifestyle modifications, blood sugar is still high, then we have to give tablets. Okay, we may start with one tablet. If we still don't have, a good, what I call immaculate or absolute blood sugar control, because that's the only way we can prevent complications. If we don't have that, we may actually give 2 drugs, or sometimes we give 3 drugs. If despite that we still have problems, then we may now have to give insulin. That's what is not there. So we are giving directly what is not there.
Professor, at what point would one have to start insulin treatment?
Well, if you look at the cause of diabetes, it's a progressive one. Okay, by the time an individual has symptoms, 50% of the function of insulin is already gone. That's at the time of diagnosis, and it is progressive. So when the patient gets to a stage where, because the tablets we give, what some of them do is to tell this place where this cell is being produced, if there's anything left of you, please bring it out. Are you getting me? So when a stage comes, because it's a progressive thing, a stage comes where there's nothing available anymore. So no matter how much tablets you give, blood sugar will not come down. So when we get to that point, we just have to recognize that we're at that point and start insulin so that, we can have a good control and we can help this patient prevent complications.
How easy is it to manage diabetes for a pregnant woman?
It's virtually the same like, a non-pregnant person, but in pregnancy, diabetes can actually cause a lot of havoc. Diabetes can affect the fetus, diabetes can affect the mother. So it's we call it risk pregnancy. It's no longer a straightforward pregnancy if you have blood sugar problems in pregnancy. And it requires, really putting an eye on this individual. It also, for example, the World Health Organization, one of the messages is stressing, stepping up the level of care. Self-management education. That individual needs to be really educated, because what we say is that management of diabetes is the art of the possible. You need to educate this individual so he can understand this disease, how to manage it and be in charge, rather than the other way around. So this pregnant woman needs to be well educated, self-monitoring. She needs to have the meter to monitor her blood sugar by herself on a daily basis so she can follow it strictly. And then usually for pregnancy, we want to put them on insulin. We don't want to play around with tablets, so we can have absolute control to save the mother and the child. Now, at the end of pregnancy, if it is pregnancy-induced diabetes, we stop the insulin and put her back on tablets.
Now, what are the consequences of poorly managed diabetes?
Poorly managed diabetes is a big problem. Diabetes affects, because blood flows to every part of the body, diabetes affects virtually every organ system of the body. Diabetes is a cause of blindness if it's not properly controlled. Diabetes can be a cause of heart attack. Diabetes can cause stroke. Diabetes destroys the nerves and the blood vessels and can cause, gangrene, resulting in, amputation. I want to quickly tell this short story. Last year, about November, I lost a 34-year-old Nigerian citizen, a male, not married yet, had diabetes for 12 years. 2 years before, had no job. 2 years before then, he lost one limb. Okay? And then 2 years after he lost one limb, he appeared to us in the teaching hospital with the other limb, because the other limb went gangrenous. We offered amputation and he refused it. Naturally so, because he's a young man not married, not to have 2 legs. All right? He had no money. We were contributing money in my unit to manage this guy until we lost him in November. This is the plight of a Nigerian citizen with diabetes, because the National Health Insurance Scheme coverage is very minimal. So you are on your own in Nigeria if you have any of these chronic diseases, and we need to do more. We need to have some form of legislation. Now, I belong to an NGO that we are trying to make some efforts to present some bill at the National Assembly. There has to be some legislation to support these people with chronic diseases like diabetes. Otherwise, we're heading for big trouble.
Now that you mentioned the healthcare system, let's look at the challenges that we're faced with concerning the healthcare system. How competent or how ready is Nigeria to monitor, to set up certain units, special units for diabetic patients?
Government is making some effort, but they need to do more. And it's multi-sectorial: government, private sector, the manufacturing industry, individuals. We all need to come together to make this effort. We need to strengthen the primary healthcare system, okay, to do what it is meant to do. We also need to if the primary healthcare system is strengthened, then the secondary healthcare system and the tertiary healthcare facility can focus on what they are meant to do. And I think I'm one of the advocates for a national diabetes center. Government needs to look at the idea of having a national diabetes center where we can actually have the right things on ground to take care of these people with diabetes.
Okay. Now, somebody asked a question and says, what is diabetes neuropathy?
Okay. Diabetes neuropathy is one of the complications of diabetes. The blood sugar when it's high for so long, it destroys the nerves, particularly those of the legs. That's one of the reasons for amputation of lower limbs. Okay? So it destroys the nerves and you no longer feel anything. So that limb now is liable to injury, and wounds don't heal easily with diabetes. So with infection and all that, it eventually leads to gangrene, and we have no option in the hospital. If the rest of the human being has to live, then we have to cut the dead part off.
Okay, well, now what are the symptoms and the care for diabetes neuropathy?
Okay, when the symptoms start, the individual may notice that you feel abnormal sensations in your lower limbs. Maybe excessive heat. You feel that as if you are putting your legs in hot water. Excessive heat or excessive cold. The nerves are misbehaving. Our feelings is the nerves that make us have our feelings. So when the nerves are misbehaving, then we begin to have abnormal feelings. Or sometimes the person is walking on the floor, but it's as if he's cutting wool. He's not feeling the strength of the floor. Are you getting me? Or he gets to a stage where he doesn't feel nothing anymore. When these little symptoms occur, it means there is something. What I discover with Nigerians is they notice a change in their body, but they just settle with it.
Why so?
Well, I don't know whether it's ignorance.
Is it as a result of different factors? Perhaps
multifactorial. Ignorance is one.
Okay.
I also discovered that Nigerians, some of us don't value knowledge so much. Now, a disease a Nigerian has not gotten. When you want to educate, even when that individual is at risk, you want to educate this individual to prevent it, he's not ready to listen. That's what I discovered with Nigerians. We're not ready to listen. So rather, they wait until they get it, and then they battle with it. So there's a need to change this orientation, and that's why I say the media has a very significant role to play in educating people.
How about those who have the knowledge but have lost confidence in the healthcare system? I give you a story of a young lady who had been so ill for a couple of days, and so she decided to go to the hospital to run a test, in fact to one of these known hospitals in Abuja. And after running the test, she went back the following day to collect her results, and she was told there was no result. They could not find her results. So what do you think such an would have on the psyche of a Nigerian?
What you have just said, I think, is the general problem we have in Nigeria as regards the concept of service delivery. The concept of service delivery needs to change, and that's why I'm happy about the concept of Cervicom. Cervicom, what it's saying is that, when an individual comes to you, that may be the only contact that individual has with government, and therefore make it quality contact.
The problem is we don't even know whether Cervicom is still alive.
That is it. So government needs still to do a bit more in sensitizing Nigerians to what service delivery should be. All right, so that is a general problem. And unfortunately, I'm ashamed to say that medicine is actually not out of it. So we also have this even in medicine. We should not, because our job is peculiar in the sense that we're dealing with objects that have a body, a spirit, and a soul. So we have a responsibility. So it should be different actually. Medicine should be set apart. But unfortunately, it's also part of it. But we try. I teach medical students in the university, and we try to, emphasize this, that we should be different, particularly because we deal with human beings whose lives are expensive. Well, as far as diabetes is concerned, it's a very complex disease that people need to be trained to handle. It is not just any doctor that can handle diabetes.
Tell us a bit about the special diets that diabetic patients should do.
Well, what I want to say is that I'm very passionate about diabetes, so I mean prevention, okay, because that's our cheaper option. What I want to say is that we don't have any diet called diabetic diet or any special diet. What we have is a healthy diet for every family member, all right? Anybody that wants to age gracefully, that's what they should do. That's what they should eat. Now, what we say is that, like I mentioned something earlier, that as we age, even without diabetes, without hypertension, there are changes in our body that will naturally tilt us towards disease side. We have to do some behavior change if we want to remain on the healthy side of the spectrum. So as we age, we need to step down on the amount of sugar we consume. We need to step down on the amount of oil we consume, whatever the name is called. We need to step down on the amount of salt we consume. For example, if you take so much salt, blood pressure rises with salt intake. So as you age, step down on the amount of salt you take. Okay? Now, you know, we like a lot of fries, a lot of oil. There are some traditional concepts that affect this healthy diet you're talking about, and this change in lifestyle we are talking. One of it is oil. You know, traditionally, oil is an evidence of affluence. When your food is oily, it means that you are affluent. So it's so difficult to make Nigerians know that oil is danger. That put minimal oil in anything you are eating. Because when the oil in your food is high, you are taking in more calorie than you require. For example, 1 gram of carbohydrate gives you 4 grams. 1 gram of carbohydrate gives you 4 calories. 1 gram of protein gives you 4. But 1 gram of fat of oil gives you 9. So when you consume more calorie than you require, there's a problem now. Because actually fatness is simple economics. When your input is more than your expenditure, then you have an imbalance that settles as fat, and that is the beginning of problem. So we need to step down on the amount of oil we take, and then sugary things. Okay, we need to step down, because like I said earlier, when you take in so much refined sugars are sugars in their most easily absorbable form. So in the moment you put it in your mouth and you swallow it down, it gets into the blood and spikes up your blood sugar. You stress this organ where this hormone is being produced. You stress it. So every time, blood sugar is high, it pushes something out to bring it down. So when you stress it continuously like that, the stage comes, it gets exhausted, and there is no going.
Okay, now you're telling us what to avoid. CAM Reports just tweeted at us, and CAM Reports is asking you, please mention natural foods that are helpful to patients living with diabetes.
Okay. We have the foods in Nigeria, not that we don't have. All right. Now, what we encourage is that when you have the medium-sized plate, okay, medium-sized plate, not the plate we use for buffet, not that. Okay, I'm one of those advocating that buffet is not healthy for us, because when you see how Nigerians fill that plate, and you watch gradually at the end of it, the plate is empty. That's not healthy eating. That's not healthy eating. We need to step down on the portion size. All right, it's like when you have that medium-sized plate, you divide an imaginary line in it, dividing it into 2 halves. 1 half should be vegetables, whatever type you like, of whatever sort. I'm not specifying. Whatever sort of vegetables you like, that should be in that half. Then the other half, you divide it again, an imaginary line on the other half. You have a quarter. You have 2 quarters now. One of the quarters should contain your bulk. Whatever amount of rice, whatever you want to eat, if it is rice, that's the space. That quarter is where it should be. If it is beans, if it is mai, if it is swallow, whatever it is. So if it is swallow, for example, what we're saying is your soup, which is in that half, should be more than the size of the swallow. I tell my diabetes patients, even the ones that like pounded yam, I don't stop them, but I show them the size of my fist. And they say, this size is too small. And I said, no, you're not going to get hungry, because that vegetable, that is bulk, that contains a lot of fiber. It is going to fill you, and you will not get hungry. And then the other quarter now contains the fruits and your protein.
Interesting. We still have Professor Prof Anumah here with us. She's an expert on these things. We're still talking about the health implications of diabetes and how to manage and prevent it, which is her emphasis points now. But let's take a short break now. This conversation will continue shortly. We have to go to the news desk to bring you Pan-Africa World. To stay with us.
Welcome to the news desk. Amnesty International Nigeria is kicking against the institution of a death sentence for kidnapping by state houses of assembly in the country. Country Director of the agency, Mohammed Ibrahim, said this in Abuja on Wednesday at the presentation of the 2015 Global Report of Death Sentences and Execution across the world. The Amnesty International boss insisted that putting the idea of a death sentence for kidnapping in Nigeria runs contrary to the global push for the abolition of capital punishment, of which Nigeria has given its consent in principle. The rights agency further observed that contemplating death sentence penalty to punish kidnapping suspects is a gross violation of their rights to fair hearing. Well, a new study suggests there is a growing market in the illegal trade of guns and weapons in Libya via social media sites, in particular Facebook. The report covered 18 months and found sales of a wide range of items from handguns to rocket-propelled grenades. The illicit sale of guns is a violation of Facebook's terms of service, and a spokesman said they encourage people to report any such postings. Former Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi was an obsessive buyer of weapons and tightly controlled the market. During his 40 years in power, it is estimated he spent more than $30 billion on arms. When rebel forces toppled his regime in 2011, the stockpiles were thrown open and a large black market emerged. Researchers believe the trade on social media began to take off in 2013 and is still growing. Well, mobile taxi service Uber is pushing into Africa, but in the Kenyan capital Nairobi, traditional taxi drivers are fighting back. In the past few months, clashes between taxi and Uber drivers have escalated so much that the police and transport ministry have been forced to step in. Uber began operating in Kenya in early 2015, making inroads into the Nairobi market by offering lower prices. However, Uber drivers around the world have faced threats, protests, and legal action from regular taxi operators who say Uber's cheaper fares and business model are driving them out of business. The head of a coalition ruling Western Libya and the capital, Khalif Ganweni, appears to have reversed a decision to dismiss his administration. In a statement, threatens to prosecute any of his ministers who cooperate with the leaders of a UN-backed unity government waiting to take national control. Tripoli's Justice Ministry had said earlier that ministers were standing aside to prevent further bloodshed. The UN-brokered unity deal agreed in December that it is aimed at reconciling splits after 5 years of conflict. Libya has been in chaos since the 2011 overthrow of long-serving ruler Muammar Gaddafi by NATO-backed forces. Since 2014, the country has had two competing administrations, the one in Tripoli, which is backed by powerful militias, and the other in the eastern port city of Tobruk. Well, that's the world news. That's Pan-African World. The conversation continues shortly. Please stay with us.
Spirit of Africa. This is Kakaki, the African Voice.
Thank you very much for still being there with us. We're still talking diabetes on this World Health Day. We have Mrs. Prof Anumah, Professor of Medicine and Endocrinology at the University of Abuja, here with us. Now, more tweets are still coming in. I think we'll be letting you react to some of them. Some of them are coming directly for you. Dabibi Lasbury says, good morning and thank you for helpful information being put out by your guest. He says he's a fitness trainer. A client stopped after 2 months. She wanted quick results. She's now on a diet with obvious quick results.
Well, It depends on how desperate she stepped down on the amount she consumes. Now, for an averagely active individual, we need a total of about 3,000 calories in 24 hours. That's everything we're taking. Now, if you are not averagely active, you can't take that. You have to step down to 2,000, 2,005. All right? The athlete that is, very active can take 5,000, 6,000 calories, but he gets to the field and burns everything else. So what is important is burning what we take in so we don't have an imbalance. Now, this person must have really gone desperate, perhaps because I know some of them. Some of them step down to as much as just 1,000, 1,002. Of course, you're going to have a drastic weight loss, but maintaining it is the problem. Is this individual going to be able to maintain herself on just 1,200 or 1,500?
Why is it a problem to maintain that?
Discipline and motivation is not easy. To see all the things you love, you like on a daily basis and you can't go near it is very difficult. So discipline and passion and the zeal and understanding the consequences of excess weight, they help people, but it's not so easy.
So you advise him an active life?
Yeah, what we rather want to do is step down slightly. Is like, for example, if you want to lose 0.5 kg in a week, you know what you do? You step down on your calorie intake by 500 and you lose 500 calories with physical activity on a daily basis for you to lose 0.5 kg. So we will rather prefer it this way. This is the one that we know can be sustained. Now, perhaps why that individual didn't lose much weight with exercise, that he's not doing enough. For example, if you want to lose, let's say you are 70 kilograms, and you wanted to lose 10 and you succeeded in losing 10. If you want to maintain that 60 kilograms, you need to persist in exercise 60 minutes to 90 minutes on a daily basis. If you don't, you will gain it back. Now people tell me that they walk on the 5th floor, for example, and they climb the stairs. All right, Nigerians don't like stairs. We can even climb stairs to 1st floor. That's what we do now. All right. So this individual climbs, but is still obese. The reason is that climbing to that 5th floor is not enough physical activity for that individual to lose weight. It may help that individual maintain the current weight, but if you want to lose, then you need to do more. So this individual was not doing enough physical activity to have lost appreciable weight.
Okay, now tell us a bit about how safe food supplements are for people living with diabetes.
Well, usually I don't have problem with supplements because in the tropics, particularly, we are marginal in many of these minerals and trace elements. We are marginal. If sometimes our cooking process diminishes their levels, okay? So supplements are okay. But what I have a problem with is when patients now leave their anti-diabetic medications and live on supplements only. That's where I have a problem.
Okay, somebody's asking, I'm sure Professor talked about it earlier, does alcohol contribute to diabetes?
Oh yes, alcohol is a risk factor for diabetes in many ways. Alcohol can affect the pancreas, causing chronic pancreatitis, and when that happens, then the cells are not able to produce insulin anymore. Alcohol can also affect the liver. The liver is a major organ that handles glucose metabolism. If it affects the liver too, it can lead to diabetes. So alcohol can cause diabetes.
Now, still staying on food supplements, we see a lot of adverts out there concerning the importance of food supplements in addressing some of these non-communicable diseases like diabetes. And some people have had very positive, accounts on, the outcome of their dependence on food supplements. How would you explain that?
Well, you see, there are supplements that, can take care of some of the things that go wrong at the beginning when diabetes comes up. Okay? Now, what really determines, for example, when my patients tell me they want to go on supplements and stop the anti-diabetic medications, I don't have problem. But I want them. Check your blood sugar on a regular basis. Once you have normal blood, what we want is normal blood sugar. Whatever method you want to use, doesn't matter. Once you have normal blood sugar, fine, whatever you want to take. But if blood sugar is not normal, then we have to do what is right so that you can avoid getting to that end where you have this expensive and terrible complications that we can handle.
Austin Jack Blake is asking, what is the effect, if any, of antibiotic in causing diabetes in children?
No, antibiotics has no connection with diabetes in children.
Okay.
Antibiotic therapy has no business with diabetes in children.
All right.
Okay. Dr. Prof, if you'd like to give a reminder of some of those risk factors that can lead to diabetes in children.
Okay. Like I told you, the type 1 diabetes is the one that occurs in children, and that can be because of some genetic factors. Issues of gene, we can't do much about them, right? But type 2, mind you, 90-95% of the diabetes we're talking about is type 2. It's the one we are discussing. So that's really the major issue, okay? And we had said aging is a risk factor. So we need, at some stage, if we want to avoid having these diseases, if we want to age gracefully, we must change behavior at a certain stage. And you know what? If you want to be healthy at 40, it's like you start those changes at 15, at 20. That's it. Okay? Now, then we talked about family history. So any individual with a family history should know that he or she is at risk and should get empowered to live right as early as possible so that in future he or she does not get this disease. And the children, I tell parents who have diabetes, I tell them that they have responsibility towards their children. They must ensure that their children don't get diabetes, and so they have to start those changes early. So I don't expect a parent who has diabetes to be taking the children to any of these shops where you get all the ice creams, all the chocolates, all the whatever.
Now,
all those things.
Quick one, Prof. What about natural occurring sugars in fruits, like pineapples? Because somebody just asked a question now, I think, Najuba Obinda says, is it bad to consume sugary fruits?
No. Of course we encourage fruit, because fruit is also one of the sources of fiber.
Yes.
It's like orange now, you drink the water. Usually what we do, we drink the water and throw the stuff away. That stuff is the fiber in the orange. Okay. So we encourage fruit. But for those who don't have diabetes, I don't have problem. But for those with diabetes, we have issues with two foods. There's a way we assess how high and how fast has a particular food stepped up your blood glucose. We call that glycemic index, right? The glycemic index of pineapple and watermelon is higher than the glycemic indices of other fruits. So for those who have diabetes, we tell them to step down on these two fruits. Otherwise, they can take other fruits.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor.
That's quite exhaustive indeed. Thank you so much. Prof Anumah is a professor of medicine, Department of Medicine, College of Health Sciences, University of Abuja. She's been helping us make sense of it all and quite giving us free medical consultation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm passionate about empowering people, so I don't mind it at all, because prevention is the cheaper option.
Yes. Some very appreciative messages have come in through our Twitter handle to you as well. Thanking you so much for the information you're letting everybody have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. Well, we do have a second conversation coming up, and we will be looking at ending fuel scarcity, the feasibility of April 7 targets. Please stay with us.